Hi everybody, welcome back. It's time for another homework example. What we're going to be doing this week is adding even more style to the pages that you started styling last week. So once again, the objective of this assignment is that I don't want you to be changing the HTML at all. I want you to either create a new style sheet or update last week's style sheet so that it can be used on 3 different HTML files. When you get started, it's very important that you've completed the first peer graded assignment. I'm going to assume that you have it done, and so when I talk in this video about the different changes I want you to make, you can either alter that previous homework assignment, or you really can start completely from scratch if you weren't happy with your earlier work. So let's take a look at the before and after for this assignment that I want you to try to achieve. This was our page when we first started. In homework 1, you took it from here to here. Still very simple, but just much cleaner because we added some background colors, some color fonts, and we got rid of those images. What I want you to work on this week is really changing things and making it really styled as opposed to just clean. So let's take a look at what I'd like you to work on in week 3. As you can see, this looks like a completely different site. The images are back in, I've added a background image for a navigation bar, and something that isn't necessarily easy to see when you're just looking at paper, I've added a new class that highlights which page we're on right now. So if you look, the home link is highlighted because we're on the home page. If I click on history, the history link is highlighted because we're on the history page, and in the same way, the Teams page. So this is what we call the current page that we're looking at. And so you're going to be styling this to kind of let your viewers know where they are on your page. So I'm going to go ahead and go through and talk about each of the tags I want you to look at in order to complete this assignment. So when you get started, you're going to leave that HTML code alone, and you're either going to create a new style sheet or you're going to go ahead and update the one you used before. What you're going to need to work on specifically are these elements. You need to work on the body, the header, the H1, the links, and then I have 3 classes called active, left, and right. And finally, you're going to want to put those images back in that were in the left-hand side of the page. So first, let's talk about the body. By default, your browsers put in some sort of padding and margin, but I want you to overwrite that and put something that will look consistent across all browsers. You can also feel free to adjust the size of the text, but that's not required. I know I did because I just found the text a little bit too small. Next, go to the header. The first step is to change the background color and see if you can get that to work. Next, you're going to want to add a background image. And to be honest, this will be the trickiest part of the whole homework assignment because sometimes it's not always clear where you can find the images and where you can't. So make sure you check in some of the other resources if you get stuck on this part. Next, I want you to change the font color and increase that font size a little bit more. Now, here again is something that's new that you didn't learn before. I want you to style the links that are in the navigation section, but only those links, not all the links in the page. You don't need to recreate my example exactly, but I do want your links to be nicely spaced apart. They should have some background color, rounded borders, and no underline. Make them look nice. Next, make sure you style that active class I talked about. That's how people will be able to know which page they're looking at without having to look at the URL. Now, another thing that you're going to need to work on is this idea that our page has a left and a right class to it. Now, in order to get things to go next to each other, you're going to need to mess with the display and possibly float depending on how you implement this. So make sure you change them so that they're side by side and change that background color for the left class. You may have already done that in the previous homework, but if you didn't, make sure it gets done now. Finally, we want to get back to those images. First, you need to put the images back in because hopefully in homework 1, you set their display to none, which means they're gone. So put them back into something so that they'll stack up on top of each other. Next, make sure that they're centered within that left class. I don't want the pictures to be all the way to one side or the other. And while you're centering them, make sure you put some space between them on the top and the bottom too. Once again, we'll be using the peer grader to evaluate your work. Unlike before, grades will be based on level of completion and somewhat more of how your page looks. We want to make sure you're not putting things that are hard to read or that are really kind of squished together. So if you get the chance, make sure you run your page through some different accessibility evaluators. So there was Wave and there's WebAIM, there's different places you can go. But this is a really nice part about peer grading. Your peers can tell you whether or not things don't really have the best color contrast. Now, again, proper standards are going to apply, and this is particularly important when we start talking about advanced selectors. I found that sometimes people throw everything they can possibly think of into their style sheet, and they just hope that it works. We are going to take points off if you try to do that. Now, the final thing I do want to mention is that I know that people are coding on different devices. So when you submit your code, make sure to feel free to say, my code only really looks good on a big screen or on a phone or something like that. Taking care of different screen sizes is something called responsive design that we don't handle in this particular course. So I don't expect you to make a site that looks great on every platform. What I do expect you to do is really own the code that you submit this time. Make sure you know exactly what each line is doing and feel comfortable changing little parts and feeling like your page won't break. Again, if you run into problems, make sure you hit those discussion boards. Your classmates have been really helpful, and I want to really encourage that communication. Good luck.